Hello, ladies and gentlemen, again for another episode of Fitness Facts with Professor Smalls, IFBB Pro, Biggie Smalls, that's me. And I've been doing personal training, coaching in this industry for over 20 years. So hopefully in that time, I can give you some tips, some knowledge to help you further your bodybuilding and physique goals. Today we're going to talk about the topic of bulking because it is changing, it is evolving, and we are trying to create the best physique possible, increasing our muscle mass, increasing our strength, and without getting too fat in the process. So can we get lean and get bigger at the same time? Not necessarily, but we can definitely get bigger without gaining any fat. And that's what we're trying to do. The first step when we're looking at trying to get bigger, stay leaner, or, like we say, bulking, is our nutrient content, right? So we're looking at a couple things. We're looking at our nutrient content. We're looking at our rest, the component of rest. We're looking at our training, and we are making sure that they all complement each other and don't work against each other. For instance, if I trained really hard, but I don't put the right food in, I cannot recover. If I train really hard, put the food in, but I don't rest, I cannot recover to an optimal standard, right? So typically, like I've said in the past, focusing on being consistent and being disciplined. So just because it's our off season, it doesn't mean we want to eat a bunch of junk, a bunch of non-quality nutrients, because then you can't eat enough of the quality nutrients. And I will put the disclaimer out there, everything works different for everybody. No two people are the same, but we're going to work within the norms of what should work for you. And what I've found very successful with my clients is if we start the protein around 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. The protein is going to be used for helping to rebuild the cells that we've broken down during our weight training, helping to create and increase protein synthesis so your body can turn over that protein and utilize it to help build muscle. And protein also makes your body work harder when it breaks it down. So that is getting more out of our resting metabolism. Then we're going to go to our carbohydrate base. Okay, we got to have plenty of glycogen to fuel the workouts, and we want to replenish that glycogen after the workout. So we want to make sure we're taking in at least 2 grams of glycogen or carbohydrates per pound of body weight, which will be stored as glycogen within the muscle cell. Then we go into our fat, and typically the fat, your dietary fat, is 0.5 gram per pound of body weight. It's a good start to building your base bulking menu. Typically, I like to split this depending on how long you're up during the day, but typically between 6 to 7 meals is always pretty safe. All right, so if we're looking, we're doing 6 or 7 meals a day. Now we look at, okay, so we want the bulk of our carbohydrates to be meal 1, when you first wake up, you've had an 8-hour fast, your body is more insulin sensitive for that time, so your body's going to respond by driving those nutrients into the muscle a lot faster. The other time where your insulin sensitivity is heightened is right after you train, right after you work out. So we want another bulk of our carbohydrates there. While we're training, your body's more accepting of the carbohydrates as well, because you're breaking down muscle tissue, you're working, you're utilizing those nutrients at that moment. So keeping a good source of intra-workout carbohydrates is a must as well. And then the balance would be split up amongst the other 5 to 6 meals. I would take 35% of my carbohydrate intake between meal 1, post-workout, and then fat to keep consistent. So we don't want to put fat in our post-workout meal because we're trying to keep those nutrients absorbing as quickly as possible, get into the muscle for recovery as fast as possible. And anytime we're taking in fat, we slow our body's absorption of all the nutrients. That's one of the things that takes your body. It's 9 calories per gram of fat that when you're taking it in dietary wise. Before you train is great. That can actually balance insulin levels and keep everything stable while you're training so that your body doesn't bottom out from not having enough nutrients. But during the actual post-workout process, do not put fat in that part of the diet. If we're talking about proteins, carbs, and fat, we're talking about your off season, you're trying to bulk. We don't mind if we have a little bit more fat, so good pieces of lean red meat are always good. The entire egg is always best. I mean, your leucine is in the yolk, so you're gonna get a more complete protein when you keep the yolk in. You know, salmon's a great source of omega-3s, which are gonna also make your body more insulin sensitive, so your body can handle carbohydrates and utilize those nutrients even better. Nuts are a great source. They're dense, really calorie dense. You can get a lot of calories with not a whole lot of volume. And if you're bulking, you know, like I told you to start out with 1.5 protein, 2 grams carbs, and half a gram per pound of body weight for fat. But if you do that consistently, you're not putting a whole lot of other junk in there, you'll see your body be able to adapt to that caloric level, and you'll have to start increasing it. So when you're trying to do a whole lot of volume of food, you want things that are more calorie dense sometimes, and nuts are a great way to do that. Of course, chicken, turkey, different types of poultry, even pork. I know that's not often popular, but lean cuts of pork are comparable nutrient-wise with lean cuts of chicken, with lean cuts of turkey. And they're pretty nutrient dense too. So consistent nutrient flow throughout the day is what we're looking for to keep your body in a positive anabolic state, not catabolic state. Because you know, you go too long, your blood sugar drops, and your body's got to break down glycogen within the muscle cell to elevate your blood sugar levels, the hormone called glucagon, and that is catabolic. It's breaking down muscle tissue. We don't want that, never want that. So we want to make sure that we're producing all anabolic hormones, you know, and like insulin is the most powerful anabolic hormone we have. And if we can manipulate our nutrients right, we can time that right, and we're using that insulin to drive more nutrients into the muscle cell. Typically, as the progression goes, I'll tell my clients, we're going to increase your calories if you're a typical mesomorph or a person that doesn't handle a whole lot of calories. Without putting on fat, we'll increase your caloric nature, or caloric content to 250 calories per week. If you're really good at taking in nutrients without gaining body fat, like your typical ectomorph, then we're increasing our nutrient intake about 500 calories. So we can keep gaining that muscle tissue, and again, not putting on too much fat. And with the endomorph, it may not really be about increasing any calories. It might be about reducing activity so that your body spends more time at rest and utilizing those nutrients for recovery and not so much activity. And if we're looking at bulking when it comes to training, now that's where I get excited, because I'm a powerlifter at heart, and I love off-season training, bulking training, off-season, same thing. The difference there is because you're taking a lot more nutrients, because you're not limited in the amount of calories you got to take in, because you're not worried about losing fat, you're just not trying to gain a whole lot of fat, then the workouts can be longer. They can be more strength driven, and combined with putting exercises in that are high volume to also increase muscle tissue. So when we look at bulking, we got to look at and say, okay, well, what are the two ways we gain muscle when we're training? And we're either going to build it through mechanical tension, which is I'm going to lift really heavy for 6 to 8 reps, or I'm going to look at metabolic stress. So if I'm looking at metabolic stress, now I might make those rep ranges anywhere between 15 and 20, maybe up to 100 reps just for extreme shock on the body. Because either I'm trying to produce extreme levels of lactic acid to make my body have to respond to that stress by growing, improving, or I'm creating high levels of mechanical tension that place such a demand on the muscle that I'm forced to recruit more muscle tissue to utilize during those lifts and have to bring in more higher threshold fibers to be able to perform that lift. So either mechanical tension or metabolic stress is what I'm trying to use to gain muscle tissue. And when I'm eating more food, I can handle both at the same time. Typically, when you're not taking in that much food, you want your workout shorter so you're not gonna stress both elements in the same workout. Again, when I'm bulking, I can utilize both, so I might start my workout with heavy sets of bench press, 4 sets, 6 to 8, maybe 6 sets, anywhere from 8 reps down to 4. But then at the end of the workout, I might say, we're gonna do 100 reps of front plate raises. And I have the nutrients to be able to handle all that volume of work. So off-season training can be a lot more fun. You have the energy, your mind's clear because you have enough nutrients going in to both fuel your mental aspect as well as the muscular aspect. Bulking is a great time of year, especially if you love food. You can have a couple cheats here and there, probably won't disrupt you or put you into a mode where you're gonna put too much body fat. The problem with cheat meals is if you don't have enough quality going in, you're not gonna put on quality muscle and you end up putting on too much fat. So we wanna keep cheat meals, even if we're in the off season, to a minimum. So we're gonna talk about bulking on a budget, right? And how do I get a little bigger and still maintain the house over my head, drive a car, all this kind of stuff, because bodybuilding is very expensive. So instead of doing, one is try and find yourself a good, I don't know what you have in your area, but in my area we have discount wholesale clubs, like a BJ's, a Sam's, or a Restaurant Depot. Those places you can usually buy in bulk and not have to spend as much per pound, per unit. In terms of proteins, typically, ground chicken, eggs, egg whites, they're very cheap. If ideally we talk about hydrolyzed whey protein and the high quality whey protein isolates, but if you have to get a whey protein concentrate because that's what your budget allows, that's still better than not getting some type of protein in. So, even if the protein they sell at Walmart or your supermarket is not the ideal, it's still better than not getting protein in consistently. And when you're bulking, protein is the most important nutrient for the purpose of anabolism and being able to generate protein synthesis, but it does not have to be the highest gram or the highest amount of nutrients in your diet, because remember, if we have carbs and we have fats, we don't need as much protein. It's in the absence of carbs and fats that you need more protein. So if we're using carbs and fats as our energy sources, then we don't need our body, we don't need to protect the muscle from being used as energy, so we don't need as much protein, and we can just use that for what's necessary for building and recovery, so it doesn't have to be quite as high. So you could probably get away with doing 5 to 6 ounces of protein if you're that typical 200-pound bodybuilder, or 175 to 200 pounds. You can probably get away with doing 180 grams to 200 grams of protein a day, and be okay with still sustaining growth. So that's going to cheapen your bill a lot. But I think I've always found that ground chicken breast can sometimes be inexpensive depending on where you live. But if it's not, get the frozen chicken. Frozen chicken breast is going to be considerably cheaper than fresh chicken breast. Or do some work. Get the whole chicken breast that's not already cut up and split, and de-skin it, break it down yourself, and that's a whole lot cheaper than buying chicken breasts. And you're still getting the same thing. Dark meat chicken thighs, that's a great way to go too, because again, we're bulking, so your body can handle a lot more body fat. Cheaper forms of fish, if you want to do that, like tuna fish, tilapia, they're usually not overly expensive, so they're cheaper ways to get in high quality or get in quality protein. Cottage cheese is a great way to get in some good protein. It's not as expensive as trying to do steak or ground beef. Greek yogurt is a great form of protein as well. If we recap, we're looking at prioritizing protein in our nutrients, enough carbohydrates, consistent fat intake, not overdoing anything, but high protein, high carb, moderate fat. And then if we look at the way we're going to train, we're going to specify and focus on mechanical tension and then add in metabolic stress as well. Those are my tips for successfully bulking as you are in your off season before you contest prep. I think if you try these tips, I think you're going to be very happy with the results. And that's my take, and that's how I train my clients for success, and I hope it works for you as well. So thanks for watching Facts with Professor Smalls. Like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your feedback.